Magic the Gathering players, that is time in the round. Magic players, that is time in the round. Have you ever sideboarded in a matchup that you have no idea what you're doing?
Every match.
Yeah, no, a little bit, right? It is such a struggle. I remember I was playing, because I'm on mono white tokens at the moment. And by on, I mean borrowing someone's deck.
Yes.
And I remember I was going into the, what was the matchup? It was the modern version of the Dimir mid-range deck that's kind of a little bit of it has a little bit of Pixie in it, but it's not Pixie.
Sure.
It's the blue-black, hopeless nightmare, fear of isolation, bouncing nonsense. And I just had no idea what it was, right? Because I was like, okay, yeah, no, easy. This is Dimir mid-range. They've played a Kaito on 4. I know exactly what's going on. And then I see a fear of isolation. And I'm like, oh, great, what? So I'm sideboarding, and I'm just like, what do I do? Where's my sideboard guide? Because I've written like next to each card the matchups that they come in and out of. But when you just have no idea, it's a little bit hopeless. And I ended up bringing in Exercise, which was a dead card, which is just phenomenal, you know. It did hit the Enduring Curiosity, but there was, I think, 1 total in their 75. And I was just like, it was a struggle. So the moral of the story is come prepared.
Well, and we're going to have an entire episode on sideboarding and what it is and how to do it.
1 episode?
Multiple. One is the conservative estimate to not scare people.
That's fair. I think maybe one broad episode on sideboarding, and then many little tidbits on how to sideboard with certain decks into certain metagames. I'm really excited for. We've got a lot of secrets planned for you folks coming up ahead, but I in particular am excited for our metagame breakdowns.
I'm so excited.
They're going to be so.
I
good.
love Standard.
Standard is so cool at the moment. But do you know what single card Modern Ad Nauseam falls to?
What's that?
Thoughtseize.
This is true.
Yeah.
I did, at your recommendation, read the primer on Thoughtseizes.
Oh, you read the Reed Duke Thoughtseize article?
I did read the Reed Duke Thoughtseize article and thoroughly enjoyed it.
I mean, Reed Duke is a thorough Thoughtseize enjoyer. He is the perhaps the champion of mid-range amongst many professional champions of mid-range. But yeah, he has... You will not get a more expert opinion on the card Thoughtseize than from Reed Duke.
It is an old, yet still incredibly relevant primer for understanding how the card works and how to use it.
And it's also very universally applicable. Like a lot of the lessons that you take from that article can be applied to casting your duress in Standard, or knowing when to use your Dreams of Steel and Oil. It's just such a good Magic fundamentals article. And, you know, it helps that Thoughtseize is one of those cards that, despite being from Lorwyn, so 15 odd years ago, is still one of the most powerful spells of all time, especially one of the most powerful legal spells of all time. You know, it may not be an ancestral recall, but it sure does give it a run for their money.
It's very timeless.
Yeah, you know what feels good? Thoughtseizing an ancestral recall, right?
Yes.
You win that exchange.
Turn 1, swamp, tap, Thoughtseize you.
Yes, more like turn 1, swamp, tap, dark ritual, him to Turok, Thoughtseize. But yes.
Extra steps, not necessarily required.
No. Bonus. Was that the one where they were on the boat and they had to do a bunch of... Yeah.
They were testing... I think it was a pirate episode. They were testing a bunch of pirate myths, including, you know, pirate eye patches weren't actually for if they were missing eyes. It was to switch between a daylight eye and a night eye, where one eye was more accustomed to the darkness. And so when you went below deck and went from daylight into darkness, you switched it and you covered up the eye that had just been in the sun. And the eye that's been in the dark the whole time is already well adjusted to the darkness.
Right.
And you can see better, and you're not going to go bumping into walls and knocking barrels of rum over or anything.
That really does sound like a myth.
It's actually quite... It's not 100. It works.
Oh my God.
I do this myself. Sometimes I have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom.
Yep.
And if you flick the light on, I'll close... This is ridiculous. I'll close one eye before I turn the light on. And then when I come back out and turn the light off, I'll close the eye that was just in the light And again, it's not perfect, but it's better than being plunged into complete and total darkness.
I see. I have a bedside lamp.
Oh. Oh, I didn't think about that.
No, that's fair. You also, no, you do have like partner considerations as well. So a bedside lamp is maybe a privilege of the single, but
Foiled by a single lamp, however. My hacks, my darkness hacks for
no, that's really
for
cool.
sleepy
That's
people.
I am sure that will come up one day. Pretty much as soon as from my understanding, and feel free to correct me from your wealth of experience, pretty much as soon as the Shieldred Fable era ended, Magic's standard format has actually been diverse and fun, and there's been a wide range of decks that you can actually play and expect to do well competitively.
100%. One of the bands that I remember most clearly in my head was the Reckoner Bankbuster Invoke Despair ban in Standard. And that absolutely changed Standard up. I think similar to cards now, like most recently, like Nadu and the One Ring, Reckoner Bankbuster reached a saturation through too many decks. Its inclusion in any deck was too high, and it was also just an incredibly good card. It was a 4/4 for 2 with nothing but upsides. And card draw, colorless card draw in any deck was incredible. Once that era passed, I think the percentage of Rakdos and Dimir midrange fell off so severely it opened up the meta and really changed for the better. That's one that sticks out in my head most. But this last year has been incredible. The diversity of decks with rotation happening last year as well. The way that Standard changed this last year, I've never seen so many different decks in the meta. I've never seen so many people trying different decks as well and brewing their own Standard decks. It's been amazing.
I don't know about you, but the format still feels unsolved to me. We have new decks that are tearing through the meta that have come out a week, 2 weeks ago. And when was Worlds? It was last year, right?
It was at Vegas.
Yeah.
At MagicCon Vegas was the last standard tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think something that speaks to that as well. I remember there was a period of time people were running around with Dimir Demons. And at the events that I saw here, wasn't seeing that deck necessarily win overall. It was performing well. It's structurally a good deck, but wasn't seeing it absolutely dominate at every event that I went to here. There was still instances of mono white control, Boros mice, and then variations on Boros in different ways now with foundations, go up against what is a world's level deck and beat it.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel as though we get shoehorned into a corner of having 3 decks in the top and you're either playing this, that, or the other thing. And that's it. And there's no room for creativity. I find Standard is one of the most creative formats right now outside of Commander that allows for infinite or nearly infinite creativity.
And because the power level of Standard is comparatively lower than other 60-card formats, especially the Eternal ones like Pioneer and Modern, this is going to sound a little bit terrible of me, but your janky homebrew deck has so much more of a chance of being very competitive, right? So the quality of cards that Wizards is releasing at the moment, especially in standard sets, and I imagine will continue to be true going forward, is very high. So the old adage of not being able to play standard but playing draft and collecting cards, you can bring your pile of draft cards to a standard format more or less and expect it to be reasonably good. I guess like the prime example of this is the blue-white Glimmers deck that you would, I believe you have and you have played. And yeah, it's not tier 1, I would argue it's tier 3, but it's still relatively competitive, and most of those cards are from Duskmourn, right?
Yeah, it is. I played that deck on an episode with our friends at Cozy Magic Club when they did their standard episode, and I played Eerie Enchantments. I think 90% of the cards are from Duskmourn. I'm probably over-exaggerating here. But the deck, I think, in total is less than $150. Is
this US or Australian?
I believe US.
Okay.
Fairly affordable, all things considered, when you look at something compared to a modern deck, for example.
Or, frankly, historical standard decks.
Standard decks were also getting up in the $400 or $500 US range.
Well, that happens when the best cards in standard also happen to be the best cards in modern and legacy, right?
Yes.
When you're playing 4 Fable of the Mirrorbreaker and 4 Shieldred the Apocalypse in your standard deck, that is also seeing 4 of play in Pioneer, Modern, and Legacy. The cards do tend to spike, especially when the cards sit at Mythic like Shieldred.
With the enchantments list, I would agree. I think it's more tier 3 than tier 1, but it has its moments. Sheltered by Ghosts, I think, is currently one of the best cards in Standard. It has a full play set of those. It's an interesting deck as well. It's very fun. It's got a tempo kind of angle to it, and it's not it's not the cream of the crop, frankly, but it still performs. It still handles itself well, and It's got the tools that it needs to succeed.
Yeah, I would describe Azorius Glamours, or Eerie as it's called, as it's a metagame choice deck.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that there are going to be a series of decks that you are well matched up against, so for instance, Gruul Aggro is a pretty good matchup for the deck. If you think you're going to see a bunch of Gruul Aggro and you bring your Eerie Enchantments deck and you do see a bunch of Gruul Aggro, you're going to do well. And in other formats like Modern, that's not necessarily true because the differential in power between, all the legal cards in the set is so high. There's the difference between the One Ring and Waxmane Baku is pretty significant.
We've also seen the global tournament stage mellow out with much more of, as you describe, a mid-range slogfest. At Worlds in Las Vegas, I would comfortably categorize 5 of the top 8 decks as mid-range, and 4 of those 5 were Dimir, being black-blue color combo. As much as it can be a grindy headache to play the mirror, I think it's incredibly vital to be able to play the mirror and to play it effectively and to win your mirror matchups. As we look at playing competitively, and especially once you get to the higher tournament spaces like qualifiers and Worlds, you need to be able to win the mirror, typically because there is a greater than 0 chance you go up against it at least once. That being said, Standard is fun, and I think you shouldn't be afraid of the slogfest. I think you shouldn't fear the slogfest in that way. It is a great lesson. It is a great practice to be able to navigate a mid-range match. I think mid-range matches are some of the harder ones because it isn't just one and done like aggro. It isn't fast. It isn't quick. It is a lot of small decisions that lead to victory. And looking at, I think there was a Dimir mirror match at Worlds. That was an excellent example of playing patiently and playing smart, knowing what your opponent has, being able to predict the pattern in which they're going to play it, and be able to play your responses better than them.
Standard mirror matches, for all I gripe about them, are sort of Magic's proving ground, right? They are the most effective, certainly the quickest way to really test and develop your Magic fundamentals, right? Your understanding how to trade cards 1-for-1, and is perhaps the closest sort of experience that is analogous to something like Limited, where a lot of the decks are, slightly synergistic, slightly aggressive, or slightly controlling mid-range decks. So it does make sense. And that's also part of why mid-range decks are such a favorite of professional Magic players, because a professional Magic player will often rather have slightly worse odds against the field, but have very high agency within their deck where they're rewarded for making good decisions because they're better than everyone else. So if they're able to make better decisions than most other players, then of course it makes sense then that a mid-range deck would be something that they take. Unlike me, who is a bad Magic player, who brings combo everywhere because I like polarizing matchups, where as long as I win the dice roll, I can win any game of Magic.
Well, something that we didn't mention in this is the benefit of being on the play. versus being on the draw is absolutely something to consider.
Certainly on a game-to-game basis,
Yeah.
but kind of in a similar vein to poker, your magic skill and your magic win rate, while it is of course dependent, if you win every coin flip at the start of a game, then yes, your magic win rate is going to be higher than everybody else's. That's just sort of how that works. And if that is you, then amazing. I wish you the best of luck. You should start a career as a professional Magic player and play nothing but aggro. But on the most part, because of the law of big numbers, basically, as you keep playing Magic, that will have a substantially lesser effect going, over the long term. You will hypothetically win about the same number of coin flips as you lose. So while it is important on a game-to-game basis, it is very easy to tilt out when you lose because of a coin flip, especially in something like an aggressive mirror. It is something that isn't necessarily going to impact your win rate overall, right? Which is also why, particularly in large tournaments, things like Pro Tours and GPs, you play over the course of so many rounds in order to sort of even out the innate variance in Magic and give players the opportunity, or give rather tournament officials the opportunity to actually adjudicate somebody's proficiency with the game or proficiency with their deck, as opposed to, a 3-round F&M where perhaps, if you win 3 coin flips in a row, you're going to have a 70% chance of winning the tournament.